Disney Star Wars, The Mandalorian, and Grogu from Lucasfilm debuts this weekend on May 22nd. And it's not starting off as well as the Walt Disney Company would hope, because we have articles like this from Variety magazine highlighting some of the early reviews coming in, saying The Mandalorian and Grogu gets divided reactions from a thrilling adventure to one of the weakest Star Wars movies and a snooze fest. But the worst of it looks yet to come, because breaking today, we're finding out that the already low expectations for the opening weekend box office for The Mandalorian and Grogu have been revised down.
I have a really bad feeling about this.
Renegade Online. Boy, oh boy, it started out rough enough coming into this movie. One that the Lucasfilm Company and the Walt Disney Company desperately needs, and I mean incredibly desperately needs, to not only perform well, but exceed expectations, to overperform not only at the box office, but with classic Star Wars fandom. The Walt Disney Company has become overly reliant in the last 7 to 10 years on an increasingly shrinking number of people who are interested in Star Wars. And note, I didn't say Star Wars fans there, just people who are interested in Disney Star Wars. Because as it's been well shown over these last few years, the traditional Star Wars fans have all but left the building. And things like The Mandalorian and Grogu are being clearly tailor-made to get that young Disney adult audience, the childless adult audience in there. We've talked about this in previous videos, shown you these things on the live streams where we've got Disney bringing in folks to see previews of Mando and Grogu, and they're all 20 and maybe young 30-something-year-olds. There's no families. There's no older Gen Xers like me, the original Star Wars generation. There's no young kids in these audiences. It's all mostly, probably, paid Disney influencers. And then we get stories like this in THR, The Hollywood Reporter, from the other day. Disney is under fire over a, quote, staged Pedro Pascal Mandalorian fan encounter, where Pedro dressed up in the Mando suit, which he's not in for 95% of this Mandalorian and Grogu, by the way. That's the regular stunt double guy that's always in the suit, unless and until the helmet comes off to see Din's face. Yeah, Pedro's around for about 5 minutes of that in this new movie, apart from the voiceover. But he showed up at the Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland over the weekend to, once again, if you can tell here, it's another bunch of Disney Star Wars adults. These are not families. These are not kids. And it's funny because when we get to some of the reviews popping up and some of the comments being made online here momentarily, before we talk about the now awful box office tracking coming in, looking to actually perform solidly worse than Solo on an adjusted basis, people are wondering where the kids and families are, and that this movie should be for kids and families, but yet Disney doesn't seem to be really engendering any favoritism from kids and families with pictures like this.
Not a great plan.
By the way, if you want to know the original source of information here for this Hollywood Reporter article, well, let's find out. As quickly spotted by online sleuths, the people consisted of Star Wars bloggers, influencers, and fan creators. The revelation has led to some backlash against the studio, which has leaned heavily on influencers in recent years to generate hype ahead of releases. Does anyone notice that one prominent, if not the most prominent influencer is missing? The guy with the biggest Star Wars channel on YouTube of all, Star Wars Theory. Never invited to these things. What happened?
You're hiding me.
One fan site wrote the backlash surrounding Pedro Pascal Disneyland stunts taps directly into a growing problem for Disney. Audiences no longer trust the company's marketing. What fan site would that be? Well, good Lord, it's our own Geeks and Gamers boys and girls out there. This is the article that prompted basically what amounted to a repost or a rewrite by The Hollywood Reporter. So shout out to The Hollywood Reporter for citing Geeks and Gamers on this. And shout out to our entire Geeks and Gamers and That Park Place editorial and writing team, led, of course, by the great Jonas Campbell and Marvin Montanaro. Thank you guys for getting this great work done. But that's just where the problems begin, because as of Tuesday morning, reviews started populating onto Rotten Tomatoes. And yes, we get it, it's Rotten Tomatoes. But for the sake of argument and what most people are looking at, unfortunately still to this day, this is what's out there. And since, of course, we've been citing Rotten Tomatoes not necessarily as a source of reality in all cases, but as a source of information to be discussed on an academic basis, we're going to do the same thing here again. 61% currently just barely hanging on above the 60% threshold. Early this morning, with about 40 reviews in, it was actually below 60%, hovering around 56 to 58%. We're now at 104 reviews, but obviously some of these reviews that are getting fresh tomatoes don't seem so fresh. Fresh tomato. The Mandalorian Grogu is fine. It feels more like a season of the show, but it can't capture the same magic of the early days and makes no attempt to be its own thing. Somehow that's fresh. The script is pretty clunky, and the plot is admittedly a bit episodic. Fresh. There's plenty here to appease fans, but not enough to deliver that epic Star Wars feeling. Fresh. Although it's a generic premise that fails to expand horizons, fresh. The Mandalorian is neither great nor awful. Fresh. The plot is non-existent, and it really does feel like a fully CGI movie. Fresh. Grace Randolph says, who gives a shit?
Hey, where are the white women at?
It may not reinvent Star Wars, but that's exactly what Disney needed. Best Star Wars in years versus boring and lifeless. Another article, I should say, from THR on all of the divergence in these fan reviews. Collider. While The Mandalorian and Grogu delivers fun action, familiar charm, and plenty of Grogu moments, it also struggles to feel essential in a franchise that has recently produced far bolder stories like Andor and The Acolyte. Just shut up.
I think that Star Wars is so gay already.
Collider goes on to say, not terrible, not great, just surprisingly forgettable in a galaxy far, far away. I don't think I need to read the full review. But look at the score of a 6 and the headline of Collider's own article. It's not the Star Wars movie that we need right now. And quite frankly, nothing could be more on point than that. This is definitely not the Star Wars movie that Disney Lucasfilm needs right now. I'd go so far as to say they would be better off this year with no Star Wars movie. And the box office numbers we're about to take you through in the last tracking projections before opening weekend are going to bear that point out and prove it irrefutably. Social media box office guru Luis Fernando posted this earlier on Tuesday. Mandalorian and Grogu kicking off rollout at global box office on Wednesday. After mixed reviews, the industry is cautious, with projections seeing a $65 to $75 million 3-day weekend domestically in the U.S. and a $75 to $85 million 5-day overseas opening for a 140 to 160 million cume, 140 to 160 million on the entire planet of Earth for the opening 3- and 5-day domestic and international, respectively. Damn.
But wait! There's more!
And now it's time to go ahead and bury the axe, or at least deadline seems to be. Star Wars, Mandalorian, and Grogu hopes to hyperspace to 160 million global opening over Memorial Day weekend. Now remember what Luis Fernando said, that now we're seeing that Deadline concurs with his assessment. And that is, coming into this weekend, we've been covering the earlier tracking from places like Box Office Theory and Sean Robbins that we've covered on the Sunday live shows. And it's showed a slightly higher opening weekend for this movie right up until last Friday. And if what Luis is telling us is correct, and I have no reason to doubt that it is all the fan reaction to the early screenings, to the previews, and what's being published online right now about the movie that they have decided, in relatively rare fashion for a film of this type, to downgrade projections. Initially, we were talking about a $105 million 4-day opening weekend domestically, including Memorial Day, that would be. with about 85 to maybe 90 million over the 3-day. On the high side, it seems like those projections have been completely obliterated in the wrong direction.
Oh no. What happened?
The good news, according to Deadline magazine, is that Memorial Day weekend is this weekend, and it won't be the lowest post-COVID. Oh, well, that's something for Disney Star Wars to celebrate. Not having the worst post-COVID weekend. The Mandalorian and Grogu won't open as low as Warner Brothers' Furiosa did 2 years ago at this time with 32.3 million 4-day. Well, isn't that great? The new hope, Ching, is that the pick from the director Jon Favreau, co-written with executive producer Dave Filoni, which, let's be honest, the co-writing with Dave Filoni is probably the issue, and Noah Clore will meet or exceed its $80 million 4-day tracking. Whoa, hold up. We're at 80 million 4 days now? We were at 80 million on a 3-day just like not even a week ago. But here's the real kicker. According to Deadline magazine, this $80 million hopeful figure all depends on whether families show up and push the first Star Wars film in 7 years to a bigger number.
Not gonna happen. No, not gonna happen.
Again, I think that's going to be a problem considering that all of the marketing that we've seen from Disney with Star Wars fans have all been 20 and 30-something-year-old childless Disney adult social media influencers. Where's the kids? We've been asking this in each one of these Disney promotions since the get-go, and now Deadline is telling us that it's going to take families and kids showing up to this movie to bail its ass out. It's screwed. The global outlook is about $160 million worldwide, with 80 million of that from a 98% footprint offshore. The only territory not going this weekend is Korea. That start for the $165 million net production would be slightly ahead of the global openings 2018 Solo, a Star Wars story in like for likes. Full stop. No, the hell it isn't. If we properly adjust those Solo numbers from 2018 to today, you're talking about, at minimum, an average 40% ticket price increase, if not closer to 50. That opening weekend for Solo, that full run for Solo would be sharply higher. Let's take a look at that. Solo opened with a domestic of about $103 million. That would be $140 to $150 million in today's ticket prices. We have more Dolby screens, more 4DX, more IMAX, more PLFs. And as we create more of these screens, more of these types of film gravitate onto being on those screens, meaning a higher and higher percentage of ticket sales now are for those premium large formats. Look at the records that IMAX has been setting in the last couple of years with attendance and ticket sales and overall top-line revenue. There's a reason that IMAX has been performing as well as it has on Wall Street. We didn't have as many of those back in 2018. But if we put the same number of butts and seats today in the same kind of theaters that Mandalorian and Grogu is going to enjoy to the same ratios, then Solo would absolutely destroy it. We're looking at what is going to be roughly a performance of half of Solo by Mandalorian and Grogu. Yeah, let me repeat that again. The opening weekend, if this $80 million figure holds on an adjusted basis, just counting butts and seats, it's going to do about maybe slightly more than half as well as Solo.
I started having nightmares. I was waking up in the middle of the night like this. Ah!
Now, of course, Solo had an enormous amount of expense working against it, namely because of Lord and Miller being terminated 80% through the film to be replaced by Ron Howard. The costs for Solo soared in production alone somewhere close to or slightly past, I believe, $300 million. This was an absolute disaster. But the problem here for Mandalorian and Grogu is not terribly dissimilar. Even with a net $165 million production expense, we still have to factor in what is absolutely going to be an outrageous marketing campaign expense, global prints and ads. This is not going to be a $75 or $80 or even a $100 million outlay in marketing capital by the Walt Disney Company. You can expect that Disney, by the end of this thing, is probably going to have dropped somewhere between $125 to $150 million in the ground on marketing, in addition to the $165 million they spent to produce it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Of course, we'll talk about this as the week goes on, and as we start getting more numbers in, make sure to join us Wednesday evening for a special live show ahead of this movie releasing with our friends from the Valiant's Vixens group. Hope to see you there, 6 p.m. Eastern. Take care. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.